What are the types of trust that exist?
Depending of the use of the trust, there are there are, for example, trusts that allow you to grant the asset to the next generation, to give the asset to the next generation, if that's the objective of the trust. There are trusts, for example, that are created with the benefit of funding education for the next generation, for example. There are trusts um, that receive the assets that you have, and they will, after you carefully instruct what is going the what how the asset will be distributed, you will the asset will be given to the person that you have. So this is this is a different type of trust. There are other trusts, for example, that are created for specific purposes. For example, you want to donate a certain part of your asset or your income to a specific foundation or a specific institution, and you instruct in the indenture, in the document of the trust, that that part of your assets should be given to X or Y foundation or X or Y nonprofit organization. So it depends of the objective. There are trusts for preservation of income. I'm sorry, preservation of the assets. There are trusts for donation, um, a trust that is giving away your assets to detail or specific institutions. There are also trusts that they are useful for finance and a specific objective. It could be the education from your grandchildren's or any project that in the future might arise. For example, there are if we go for we differentiate between offshore trust and domestic trust in the United States or in Europe. There are irrevocable trust and revocable trust in the United States. In outside of the US, let's say an offshore trust, they are usually done irrevocable. There are irrevocable trusts. There are also revocable trusts, but at the end, the objective of the trust for offshore trust is the giving of the asset to the next generations, or to preserve. I've seen trusts, for example, offshore trusts, that there are companies in Latin American countries. There are any type of company, and the assets or the shares of the company are given to the trust. So the owner is not anymore the person, a person. The trust is the owner of the assets. So when the shares of the company in any country are given to an offshore entity, the offshore entity, in this case the offshore trust, will be the one who will be the owner, and in addition will be the one who controls the company, and also will be able to dispose of the dividends that the trust is going to receive, because that is something else. When the assets are transferred to the trust, and this trust creates income, it could be a property, it could be a company. A property creates rent, company creates dividends or profits. The trust is the one that receives the profits, or the rents or the income, and that is now the trust is the owner of that. And depending on the legislation of the trust will pay taxes, or if it's an offshore trust, will not pay taxes because there's no taxes in the offshore legislation of the offshore jurisdiction. But that is when the assets of the trust are transferred to the offshore, and when the assets of the title of the domestic company in any country are given to a trust in a foreign jurisdiction, like an offshore trust. So that is that is that's going to be the result. If the trust is formed in the United States, then things change a little, because here in the United States there are a lot of types of trust, and people create this trust for different purposes. The ones that I detailed before, to giving away the property to a new generation, to finance the education of the grandchildren, or to donate the trust to another to a foundation or to a non-profit organization. Those are the main types of trust that are given. And these types of trust could be revocable and irrevocable. when the trust is revocable, the IRS in the United States consider that there is no trust. So it's a disregarded entity trust. It means that the owner of the trust will be the one responsible for filing taxes and all that, like it is for himself. So the trust for the IRS doesn't exist. It will be executable, or it will be executed when the individual dies. Then the trust takes over if all the assets of the individual are in the trust. That is not the case for an offshore trust. Offshore trusts, they are in the Constitution. For an offshore trust, the the ones that I have seen mostly are for holding of assets. So if I own shares and I don't want to open a trust in the United States or in Europe, I go to an offshore entity. Could be Panama, could be Cook's Islands in close to New Zealand, or New Zealand, Australia, or it could be in an offshore jurisdiction here in the Caribbean, like Nevis, or in Cayman Island. I say Nevis. Nevis is a better jurisdiction for trust. So if I go there and I open the trust, the objective that I open that kind of trust, an offshore trust, will be to transfer my assets, and the trust holds the assets for asset protection. So offshore trust, there are not too many types, like I want to donate to this institution or I want to do that. Offshore trusts are not very much used for that. I've seen trusts like that they open, there is a foundation in Panama, for example, there is a trust in Panama, and then the trust owns the shares of the companies in Latin America, and the trust pays when the trust pays dividend, pays or donates the part of the income from the companies to the foundations in Panama. I've seen that combination to between companies in Latin America, a trust in Panama, and a foundation in Panama as well. Or it can also be that the assets, that the shares are given to the foundations in Panama, and the foundation in Panama is the beneficiary from the trust. That also works. But that is an offshore structure, and it's very well used by many Latin American business owners. That they open a company in Panama, in Panama, or they open a trust in Panama, or they open a foundation in Panama with those objectives. In the United States, it's a little different. Offshore entities, there is no revocable or irrevocable trust. There's only one figure. Once you open a trust in an offshore entity, it is a trust and cannot be revoked unless you go to the court and then you want to close the trust. But there is no legislation that if you report to the offshore jurisdiction, there's no disclassification of disregarded trust, like a trust that is separate from you, or a trust that is not separate from you. That doesn't exist offshore. That only exists here in the US. So in offshore jurisdiction, there is only one type of trust, a trust. That's it. In the United States, there is this classification of disregarded, a disregarded trust. When a trust is disregarded, or irrevocable trust, a revocable trust, it means that the trust doesn't exist for the IRS. It exists only for the courts, and you are responsible for all the taxes that the income or the assets are producing. So the asset that could be these shares, could be property, could be royalty, all the income, licenses that produce royalty, all these assets that produce income, and that income is earned to the trust, because the trust now is the owner of all these assets. For the IRS, if that trust is revocable, it doesn't exist. You pay the taxes, even though you have a trust. When the trust is done irrevocable, meaning that there's no way to go back, then the trust pays taxes, and you are relieved of all those taxes. This type of instruments is very well used by the rich and famous, with the objective of discharge the responsibilities of taxes and giving it to the trust, as one thing. And second, to protect the assets that they hold from, say, frivolous claims or from frivolous lawsuits that they may have because they are rich and famous.
Understood.